Hey guys, Anime Princess here, and today we're going to be covering the Heatshiver Tech, which can be used to double our DPS on Spark on a League Start friendly budget. Now, before we get into this, let's just start by going over the Crucible League, and I'll give some of my impressions as well as advice. So the League mechanic, first of all, feels very difficult, so you guys might feel you don't have enough defenses. If you guys feel like you're falling over, make sure you rewatch the part of the League Start video covering defenses, because we do need to make sure we have some of those defensive layers quite early on because of the League mechanic. I aim to get around 25,000 armor, and I'm coupling that with a small passive cluster for Enduring Composure, which gives 3 endurance charges. So you're going to have to pass to the side of the tree and grab a cluster jewel slot. The cluster jewel for Enduring Composure is like 5 to 10C. It's pretty budget. And when you combine the armor with your endurance charges, you get huge mitigation for fizz hits. And I did do the swap over to a shield so we can get our spell block up with Tempest Shield Aura relatively early. So I'm using Tempest Shield, Determination, Zealotry. I have no increased mana reservation except for what we get on the tree, and that seems to work out perfectly fine. So we have a good mixture of spell defense and physical hit defense. My advice for getting your armor values up there would be, well, first of all, if you can't afford a Heatshiver yet, you can buy a really cheap armor-based helmet around 1 to 2C. There are links for these stuff in the Spark content playlist. So if you're looking for budget gearing in general, I would still recommend going to the Spark playlist, and it's one of the first videos. Talks over how to get these budget gear for pretty cheap. I also went for an armor, energy shield, body armor base. This way you can get a lot of armor on the body armor while still being able to color our sockets, because if there's an energy shield component of the armor, you're going to get blue sockets quite easily. On day 2 of the league, we killed Eater and Exile bosses. We did this with a DPS of around 500,000, and obviously we did it after the crit swap, so I'll include my POB of the current character in the description. When we finished off the day, we had almost 800,000 DPS, but we did do those bosses quite a bit earlier with less DPS. All right, let's get into looking at the POB, and we'll go over my gear, and we'll talk about Heatshiver. Let's talk about the unique helmet Heatshiver and why we might want to use this on a budget. So Heatshiver has 2 really important lines. The first one being gain 100% of cold damage as extra fire damage against frozen enemies. Keyword frozen. The other line is gain 1% of cold damage as extra fire damage per 1% chill effect on enemy. And keep in mind, chill effect is capped at 30%. So in an ideal scenario, when you do 100% damage as cold, you can do 130% of your full damage as extra fire damage. So we're more than doubling our damage with Heatshiver in the optimal scenario. However, Spark is not inherently a cold damage skill. Thankfully, we like to use Call of the Brotherhoods in any case anyways. The reason why we like to use Call of the Brotherhoods is because we do like to convert our damage to cold damage. Converting to cold damage allows us to freeze, chill, and shatter enemies. Freeze, all these effects make the map much safer to run. Shattering is nice because it destroys corpses, so strong box effects that blow up all the corpses, or on-death effects like porcupines shooting at all the quills. This doesn't happen because those need a corpse to proc. Freezing enemies is like perma-stunning them. They can't do anything. It's a very safe defensive mechanic. And chill also makes them much less scary because we're reducing their action speed and they're not hitting us as fast. In a normal Spark setup without Heatshiver, you would only want 1 Call of the Brotherhood because our lightning portion of our damage is how we inflict shocks, and since we're crit based, we're always going to shock, and the higher shock value, the bigger damage multiplier. However, in the case of Heatshiver, we are going to lose our big shocks in favor of getting all this extra damage as fire damage, because this is going to be more damage than any shock could ever give us. So in an ideal world, we would catalyze these Call of the Brotherhoods with turbulent catalysts, which give us enhanced elemental damage, because if we read the modifier for lightning damage converted to cold damage, that has an elemental tag. So we would be able to convert 48% on both rings to get very close to 100% conversion. But by default, with two Call of the Brotherhoods, we're only converting 80%. So we're not getting the full benefit of the Heatshiver, but we're still getting a crazy amount because we're still going to be freezing enemies and we're going to be chilling enemies. The reason we're guaranteed to be freezing and chilling is because we are trying to crit cap, right? Well, in my case, I'm only at 80% crit cap right now. It's the beginning of day 3. We still need to add some more crit chance, but we will get it up there. I'm actually in the middle of crafting a body armor with the DPS body armor guide that gives us increased spell critical strike chance and frenzy on hit, and that bumps me up to 97%. But that body armor isn't quite finished. The prefixes are bad, so we're going to craft that on stream today, most likely. We're going to finish the craft. Now, the scenarios where you might not be freezing enemies are against like uber bosses and stuff, so just keep in mind if the enemy boss just has so much HP that you're not doing the minimum amount of damage to inflict a freeze, you're going to be losing out on half your damage. So just keep that in mind. With Heatshiver, you still want to scale your damage quite high to make sure we're hitting that minimum threshold for freeze. And if there's a map modifier that lets us not able to freeze enemies, then obviously Heatshiver will do nothing. So those are just two important things you need to keep in mind that might not be obvious. This damage is conditional. Most of the time you're going to meet those conditions, but you just need to be aware there are times where you will not get this bonus damage. All right, so let's talk about why I'm recommending this. Well, obviously, this is very strong in a league start because you are doubling your damage. It's not easy to double your damage with one helmet slot and one ring slot. And I'm not going to count the other ring slot because Call of the Brotherhood is core on Spark regardless. So it's just 2 slots to double our damage. Let's look at PoE Ninja. Heatshiver started off cheap, but very, very quickly on day 1 rose to 35C. It has leveled out at 35C. So if you're watching this later in the league, the Heatshiver Tech is probably going to be even more budget friendly, but I'd say 35C is a good budget way to double your damage. For Call of the Brotherhood, it peaked at 14. It's now down to 4 chaos. It's very cheap. So yeah, this is really good budget tech on a league start for Spark. If you're having trouble on the league start, feel free to drop by the Twitch channel. You can also watch my VODs as I stream every second of gameplay on the league start. And if you're watching this in the future, like 2 weeks in the future, the VODs aren't going to exist because Twitch prunes it. However, I am making a second YouTube channel called Anime Princess VODs. I'll put the link in the description of this video. And then before those videos expire, I'll try and upload them onto this channel. Probably work on that next week, just so you guys will have like a league start resource of just able to see what I'm doing. All right, I think I'm gonna pop up on Twitch again. I'm really eager to get back to Blossom Maps. I'm gonna hopefully kill Maven tonight and get some more progress. We're doing the Blighted Map farming strategy. There are video guides on the Atlas and also the Blighted Map strategy on the channel, so you can check those out. Very strong way to do currency farming on a budget because your gear does not really matter. You can do Blighted Maps with terrible gear. You can in fact do it without even casting your skill. So we cover that in the videos. Make sure to check them out, and I'll see you guys live on Twitch.